Everybody, and welcome to this meeting of the Police and Crime panel. Before we get down to the business on the agenda, I'm just going to do a round of introductions because I think there are one or two new faces around the table. My name is Claire George and I'm an independent member and chair of this panel.
Hello, I'm Pippa Rose. I'm the Democratic Services.
I'm Councillor Anna Bradnam, and I'm the representative from one of the representatives from Cambridgeshire County Council.
My name is Marge Butell. I'm a councillor with Huntingdonshire District Council.
Hi, I'm Cameron Holloway. I'm the representative from Cambridge City Council.
Julie Kerr, Huntingdonshire District Council.
Hello, I'm Councillor Helen Leeming. I'm representing South Cambs District Council.
Catherine Kimberley, Head of Engagement.
Good afternoon, Darryl Preston, Police and Crime Commissioner for Cambridgeshire and Peterborough.
Good afternoon, Christina Turner, Director for Strategic Partnerships in.
Yeah, and finally, Jack Hudson. I'm Chief Exec, the Commissioner's Chief Exec and Monitoring Officer.
Thank you very much. We'll move on to the agenda now. Agenda item number 1, apologies for absence. Pippa, have we received any apologies?
Apologies have been received from Councillors John Gowen and Christine Whelan.
Thank you. Agenda item number 2, declarations of interest. Do any members have a declaration of interest that they wish to declare? No, thank you. Agenda item number 3, then the minutes of the previous meeting. This item 2 is approve both the minutes of the previous meeting held on the 31st of July and the confirmation hearing held on the 15th of August. Members have had an opportunity to review the minutes. Do they have any comments that they wish to raise, or can they indicate that they agree with both sets of minutes?
I'm happy that they're a true record.
Thank you very much. Unanimous. Happy to accept. Thank you, Pippa. Right, agenda item number 4, Police and Crime Plan for 2024 to 28, particularly with a focus on public consultation. The item on the agenda today is the Police and Crime Plan for 2024 to 28. Commissioner, would you like to talk us through this item, please?
Thank you, Chair. If I may, could I just respond on some of the things we said we would take away last panel meeting, and I'll be swift. There was one issue raised by Councillor Bradnam around some admin and secretariat issues, which I believed is being dealt with and progressed by the secretariat. There was a comment in relation to a lot of the paper's work to note, and I think there was a comment in a role of supporting and challenge what more could be done. Hopefully we've addressed that. I thought it was a very good and valid point. We've addressed that in the paper around community safety partnerships, and there is more of an ask of panel members in moving that forward. There was a question, I think, once again from Councillor Bradnam in relation to safeguarding on the back of the appeal assessment. Safeguarding, as you know, is something that I am very keen, and actually have a statutory responsibility myself as Police and Crime Commissioner. I had a further meeting with the Chief Constable yesterday in relation to safeguarding and the constabulary and partnership response. I was reassured by the Chief Constable there is lots of work going on, particularly those 2 areas that HMIC, FRS picked up, management of sex offenders and online investigations. An awful lot of work has gone on there, which I was reassured about. Perhaps the one thing of note, though, with the separation of Peterborough and Cambridgeshire, the Unitary Authority and Cambridgeshire County Council in safeguarding measures, that does put an extra burden on the constabulary and other agencies such as health who work across. That will be managed, but I just want to highlight that that's certainly not an optimal position in relation to that, but I'm assured that there are no safeguarding concerns moving forward. And then lastly, there was a request to bring back to this panel updates in relation to how the actions relating to the HMIC FRS peer inspection are ongoing, and that can be dealt with in the forward planning meeting, which I know my Chief Executive will be talking to you all about. So, Chair, if I may move on now.
Thank you.
I think it's here. Yeah. So the next part is around the police and crime plan public consultation. The panel will be aware that a statutory responsibility for a police and crime commissioner is to produce a police and crime plan for the police force area within a year of being elected to the role. I was keen that we moved on this swiftly, but certainly in consultation. And that consultation took and is taking a number of parts. Firstly, there's the consultation with partners, statutory partners such as the Combined Authority, the district councils, health, etc. But as, if not more importantly, the public consultation as well. And the public consultation took the form of a survey whereby I'd already decided on the themes which I thought should be within the police and crime plan under the overarching banner of safe in communities, and those 4 pillars that I believe should be in there based on the previous police and crime plan and my interaction with both partners and the communities that we serve on a daily basis. Firstly being early intervention and prevention. So this is stopping crime from happening in the first place. Particular focus, and I have a particular passion for this early intervention with children and young people. Tackling crime and antisocial behaviour, this is obvious, and this will be much of what the public will be looking to. We know that we have some, we do have some high harm, high risk crime types that absolutely the partnerships need to be tackling, but also those local issues. And I think councillors in the room will be very much aware that local issues matter really importantly to our local communities. So within tackling crime and antisocial behaviour, that's a key theme. And underneath that, there'll be many strands that you'll be aware of. So local antisocial behaviour, road safety, drug taking, those sort of neighbourhood crimes. Supporting victims and witnesses, which is a statutory responsibility, and one which I think we do very well in this county, both with our Constabulary Victims Hub and some of the significant funding that my team and partners in the local authority have brought in from Ministry of Justice and Home Office, particularly in relation to survivors of domestic and abuse and sexual violence, where I think we are punching above our weight in this county, but always more to do, and obviously always a risk that funding doesn't materialise again moving forward, but I shall lobby very hard. So talking about the survey, it spanned a 4-week period. We did quite a lot of media. I went on the radio myself, and we got some local press interest as well. What I can say, the response to the survey was 1,364, which is actually significantly up on last year and significantly more than many other surveys. But it's not lost on me that that's a small percentage of the population. But I do thank my team because we did push it really hard where we could. And I think we found out of those responses, they were very broadly supportive of those themes. We did ask for any more that they were to include, and then the sort of things that we might expect to hear about those local issues that matter to our local communities. So they've all been collated, and one way or the other, they will be able to put that into the police and crime plan, which will be delivered later this year. The reoccurring themes were around policing visibility, the reporting of crime, and more to tackle antisocial behaviour and antisocial driving, going back to road safety. So those are some of the key themes, notwithstanding, they're all being collated, and we will use those. A question that is often then asked is around the seldom heard, I believe. Now, seldom heard communities, the hard to reach, I think we did. Because it's fair to say that when you break down the demographics of people who respond to these surveys, the vast majority are people like me. And that goes across the board with any surveys which our local organisations try and do. I am convinced, and actually I can tell a brief story around this, when we do these surveys, they will tell us about local concerns, as I've just pointed out. If I go into one of our schools in Peterborough and talk to young people, they will talk about knives, they will talk about safe spaces, and they will talk about gangs and drugs. So that's why it's really important to engage with different aspects of the community. Really pleased to say that not only have we done that, have I been doing that, we have a very focused plan. I'm going to be quite busy over the next few weeks, thanks to my head of communications, because we have a number of those seldom heard of. I wonder, Chair, if it might be just worth asking Catherine just to quickly run through some of those organisations that we're going to visit within the next couple of weeks.
Sure. So, sorry, can you hear me? Thank you, Commissioner. So, as we know, the survey results, the online survey results, are not representative of the communities we serve. So, it's really important to us to reach out to trusted individuals within those communities. So, we've got a really good example which is happening right now, and that's a representative body for the Gypsy Roma Traveller community, and they're known as One Voice. So, what we're doing, rather than sending a survey, a blank piece of paper and hoping for responses, as we're organising some focus groups through trusted individuals that work within that unit. So the questions will come from that trusted individual, not from ourselves. So that should inspire confidence and trust in those communities, to give their feedback in a safe environment. So we've got that one set up. We're visiting several schools across the county. You'll know some of them, Netherhall in Cambridge City, so some of the more diverse schools, so that we get good responses from people from all sorts of backgrounds. And then also disability groups. So that's another area where we struggle to get responses from people. We've got some fantastic organisations around the county, the Speak Out Council, through Voiceability, some of the day centres. So as Darryl says, he's got a lot of commitments and has done some of these visits already. All of that feedback is then collated, and then we read it against the other responses we've had and make sure all of those voices are included in the plan.
So we obviously will be doing those, and that will feed into the plan as well, with the plan to bring the plan back to the panel in November of this year. Chair, that's an update on the consultation and the progress in the police and crime plan.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. Questions? Right, Councillor Bradnam first.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for your summary of the report and the consultation process. So what I wanted to, you identified that 1,364 is a small number of respondents, and I just wanted to understand what is the population that you were hoping to catch through the survey. In other words, this would be, what percentage is this of the population of Cambridgeshire? And that's the first question. And are there, actually what I registered was, that you had done a lot of work to try and engage people to take part in this consultation because it's important. And I wondered if if there maybe is a bit of an exercise around asking people why they didn't, to find out, because it might be people feel that if they give information to this survey, they might be in some way identifiable, and so there might be a fear factor. So youngsters might not take part if they thought that they might be identifiable. The other one was actually in contrast to what you said. I noticed that the proportion of people who did respond, a quarter had disabilities, and whilst that may well represent that may be representative of the entire population, but I wondered if that was a higher than expected proportion, it might be that people with disabilities have a very strong motivation to let you understand what they need. And so they might have responded in greater numbers than the general population because they have such great need and concerns. So I'll leave it at that for the time being. Thank you.
So, Chair, in relation to that first question, I think off the top of my head in basic maths, it's probably about 1%, isn't it? If we're, it's probably it's over just over 1% of the population. I think on basic maths. That I think the second part is we worked hard. This is not uncommon. I think the Combined Authority did a survey recently. They got 400. You know, and that's no, they push that as well. You know, this is about the public wanting to or willing to engage. Interestingly, and my chief exec will correct me if I'm wrong, the county council did one recently, or not too long ago, which actually showed 85% of our Cambridgeshire residents felt safe or very safe, which was really good news. My understanding is that cost a significant amount of money, but did have a good response. My stance is that I don't have a lot of money to spend on it. I prefer that to go direct into policing. And what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to go out and talk to lots and lots of people to engage. But notwithstanding that, you make some valid points. Why is it people aren't? There's a piece of work, my team are leading on this, and Catherine as well. I think there might be a little bit of survey fatigue. And we're not being very intelligent, and include ourselves in doing that. So if the councils are putting out a survey, the Combined Authority are putting out a survey, the Police and Crime Commission is putting out a survey, in this amount, I mean, I'd be thinking, can't we bother doing another one? We need to do it together. And we're working on that, and that is now in progression, and that, I think, is a good step forward where we actually put one out to our communities, and you can include, you know, not just, you know, community safety, but other aspects as well.
That's the point I wanted to come back with. Is there a way that these could be, you could add your questions onto another survey, maybe, or you could combine it, or you could piggyback another forum, as it were, to get it to more people. Anyway, just a thought.
Thank you. Councillor Patel.
Sorry,
Sorry.
could I just come in with another point? So just to reference, so you mentioned a really good question. So as Darryl has pointed out, this is an issue for the whole of the public sector at the moment. So the piece of work that we're referring to is the Integrated Care Board brought together people in my position, and we're calling it participation and involvement. And we're all looking at the area with a view to working on a shared platform. So there's a sort of, you know, place you can go to as a member of the public, and you can pick which survey you want to respond to, and it's really quick and easy and accessible, rather than 7, 8, 9 being out at the same time. So, but that's going to take about a year and funding to get to a solution. But just so you know, it's something we're all looking at and all concerned about. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Patel. Middle button. Middle button.
Can you hear me now? Okay, I'm always at a loss as to why we never use the parish council network. You know, I'm chairman of our parish council, and I hadn't heard of it. So how are you getting out to the parish councils? Because that's your, you know, they run the villages, they know the people in the, they could get it out for you. And I just don't understand why it's never come.
So we certainly did mail out to all the parish councils, and maybe it's one we have an old contact. I don't know why that's fallen through, but we certainly do that, and we normally go through the clerks. So apologies, we'll make sure you get it next time.
And maybe try your clerks on your chairs.
Councillor Holloway.
Thank you. Thank you. I mean, you've provided here some very brief summaries of some of the responses. One of the issues that probably comes up most for me in terms of when people are talking about their interaction with the police is about neighbourhood policing, and I'm sure it comes up. Yeah, and I'm sure it comes up with you a lot as well. So I just wondered, I don't know how much you're able to share about the responses at this point, but is that something that came up, and how do you anticipate putting something about strengthening neighbourhood policing within the plan?
So I think there's 2 points there. Visible policing certainly came up, and always will, and always does in the meetings and conversations that I have, and in your roles. No doubt that that's something that comes up. I completely understand that. The Chief Constable understands that, and that's why there is a commitment from him to invest in our local neighbourhood policing teams, and that's basically more people. So we've got more police officers now. There'll be more police officers in those local policing teams. We had a policy announcement from government as well in relation to uplift the neighbourhood policing. We've yet to see the detail on that, but I look forward and welcome, as long as it is appropriately funded, that we can further bolster neighbourhood policing. But I will be frank and honest when asked that question by communities, and I do try to explain that visible policing, it makes me feel better seeing a police officer. Whether it makes us safer is another matter. And also there are lots of police officers and staff who their role isn't that front line, but they're the detectives investigating domestic abuse or sexual violence, which we all understand, but we need those as well. And there's a finite number of resources. I'm far more interested that we stop crime from happening in the first place, and then the police do a really good job at trying to solve it if unfortunately it does happen. Notwithstanding that, I understand that people want to see the police. In my view, there needs to be a real balancing act with seeing the police and actually the police keeping us safe.
It brings up thank you for the answer. I think it brings up an interesting general point, I suppose, about as you get these different responses, both the survey itself and then also from your interactions as you're going around to different groups. How do you balance that different feedback that you're getting? Because clearly you'll get some different responses from different groups, and how do you weigh those up and then put those into your plan ultimately in an effective way?
No, it's a really good question. Actually, the tough job that falls to is the Chief Constable, in essence, who has operational independence but must take regard of the police and crime plan. So I talked about some of those high harm areas, and also you have the strategic policing requirement. So these are set by government, and violence against women and girls is one of those, for example, which the Chief Constable must deal with. And I will totally support the Chief Constable to do that. So those areas will take priority, not least of which they're a government priority, but they are a priority for me as well as the Chief Constable. But some of those other areas, rural crime is interesting because obviously we have a significant rural community with differing needs in relation to policing response. So I would include rural crime in the police and crime plan. There will be some stuff that I'm directly responsible for, so I can support the countryside watch and things like that, and I can do that. But the Chief Constable also has to take an account and therefore has to balance resources in relation to how that's policed as well. Having said that, I have a professional working relationship with the Chief Constable, and those conversations will always be ongoing. I hope that helps. It's a tough one, and ultimately it's for the Chief Constable to deploy resources. But some of those preventative and commissioning, they will be clear when we draw up the plan as to what those priorities look like. And I don't think there will be a great surprise. It is about protecting the most vulnerable people and keeping people out of trouble, etc.
Councillor Leeming.
Can I ask one?
In a minute.
Yeah, okay.
In a minute. Councillor Leeming.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Police Crime Commissioner, for your report. So looking at page 22, there's a summary here about the sort of strongest and most common messages from the public in response in this survey. Officer visibility and the accessibility of reporting to police officers. And they're things that came up in the Peel report as well as a common thread there. I wondered whether there were any other overlaps in things that had turned up. I know they're two very different sorts of review, but I wondered whether there was any similarities of what was coming up and how you will balance those different responses from these two very different public pieces of scrutiny.
Thank you. It's a good question. I think that the first bit around 101, and as panel members, you've been updated, and this is something we've talked about for the past 3.5 years. That's why it's quite useful having the HMIC report, because that gives me another way of holding the Chief Constable to account. So there is now improvements being made. The latest data set that I've seen is that call response times have reduced quite significantly, both on the 9s and 101, and that's with still an increased demand. And I suspect that's because there are more call handlers and we're getting this new telephony system. So when it comes about accessibility, I think that's one. I do often hear of problems with 101. Notwithstanding, and there are occasions when we don't tend to say when it goes well, and I know that certainly the people working in that demand hub are doing a fantastic job day in, day out, and night in, night out. So that is that quite, and it's about accessibility. Again, maybe I will tackle this. I had to tackle it for an hour on the radio the other day about police stations and being opened, and as local councillors, you no doubt will hear this as well. Visibility takes on many different things. But what I'm absolutely clear on is that the police need to be accessible. That doesn't mean walking into a police station and seeing one. That means that there is a mechanism in place where if our residents, our communities, if people need the police, they've got access to the police in the best possible way.
Thank you very much for that response. So this accessibility of police officers, that will be one of the things that underpin your plan going ahead following this consultation.
Yes, the police must be accessible.
Thank you. Councillor Whittle.
It's okay, I've answered my own question.
If only all meetings are that efficient. Well done. Thank you. Councillor Brandon.
Thank you. Just one other one. I met a small group of our children in care the other day because I chair the corporate parenting subcommittee, and I was invited along to give them some training on chairing. And it was a very small group, but one of the things that they were considering at their meeting was, how do you like to be communicated with? And it wasn't an entirely, sort of definitive thing, but they obviously, as you have identified, they use Facebook, X, Snapchat, which is one of the ones you've not mentioned on there, and Instagram. But I said to them, but hang on, what about, does it rather not depend on the kind of information you're receiving? If you're getting a thing where you're expected to give a response, is that easier, to receive the information on email or on any of these? And what was interesting was that, yes, they identified the difference in how they use them, that Facebook and Snapchat and such like are easier when it's just a quick response and it doesn't have to be grammatical and it can just be a load of text. And it doesn't have to be long, whereas if they had something that was more complicated, they recognised that they would need to interact with that in a more appropriate way. But the point was the initial alerting of them to something, and it just strikes me that maybe, I note here, and forgive me, I'm not a great user of social media, but it says 4 posts per platform were posted on the Commissioner's social media account. But does that mean that a child, or because the children are the people who aren't very well represented in their answers, would they have to go onto your platform to actually see that it was there? So is there some way that you can send it out to people in a more proactive way?
Yeah, again, really good question. So we recognise that not everyone is following the police commissioner's social media sites. So what we do is, yes, it's not not huge numbers, but what we'll do is we send out the messages to all of our network. So that's all the district councils, the parish councils, the ECOPS newsletter. You know, there's about 21,000 people signed up to that, the Commissioner's own newsletter. But again, it comes back to those trusted individuals. So it's finding the people that young people do follow. It's finding, you know, the local heroes that other groups might follow and asking them to share. But all of this without a budget. You know, you can only get so far. You can only persuade the people that understand. So, for example, the visits to the schools, we recognise we're working with the Safer Schools officers and Safeguarding, and we recognise that people like to have these questions in advance sometimes, so they feel they've got time to consider their responses, they feel they're in a safe environment, they're with trusted individuals, they're more likely to sit in a semicircle like a group forum and talk about their concerns. So that's why we're changing. And we have been changing, you know, for many months now, our approach to those particular groups. But it's all about kind of asking people to do the sharing on your behalf. Good question.
Thank you. Questions? No, thank you. So the recommendation for this item is for the panel to review the action taken by the Police and Crime Commissioner to support the Commissioner in this work and raise awareness of opportunities to engage with their constituents. Are members in agreement?
Agreed.
Yes, thank you very much. Okay, we'll move on then to agenda item number 5, tackling crime and antisocial behaviour, supporting community safety partnerships in problem-solving local issues. Commissioner, would you like to talk us through your paper, please?
Thank you, Chair, and maybe just a little bit of background here. So community safety partnerships, each of our district and city council areas will have one, and it's a statutory responsibility. In fact, it's a statutory responsibility for the local authority to put them together, although certain partners are statutorily obliged to be part of them, policing being one of them, fire, probation, and some others as well. My background has been in both policing and working across Whitehall in relation to community safety with the Association of Police and Crime Commissioners. So I've been aware of community safety partnerships for some time now. And I think it's fair to say that there's been a national view that across the country, I'm not talking about our county specifically, that the performance of those partnerships has been variable. Probably at best, and by variable, you know, there's often some really good people, because actually these are people who are normally this is part of or on top of their day jobs, so they're drawn from those agencies to form part of this partnership. And what occurred to me, certainly prior to being elected first time round, was that there was this gap, and that gap was separating, you know, the high harm, high risk types of crime, which we've discussed, and some of those other crimes that are impacting our communities on a daily basis. And they're often very local, you know, very local issues that require local problem solving. And when you had a good look at the community safety partnerships, they were doing some fantastic work, but it was often around those very high level modern day slavery, human trafficking, child sexual exploitation, which needs to be done. But there seemed to be nothing happening at that other level where we know antisocial behaviour being a good example. You know, the police can never arrest their way out of it. You know, the policing response might be part of it, but it will need other things to happen as well. And it sort of occurred to me in the team that one of the main reasons that the CSPs were unable really to deal with some of that was around resource. I mean, whose job was it, you know, to pull some of that together? So very early on, we came up with a policy and idea and communicated with the chairs and the local officers in relation to a fairly big change that I thought we could offer moving forward. And it has to be a partnership change, I can suggest, I can convene, and I can throw money at it, but ultimately we need to agree. And in essence, it was this. It was kind of redefining, not the role of the CSPs, which is set out in statute, but redefining what those CSPs are actually doing and how they're delivering, and some other mechanisms. What we did understand that to do that, we would have to put the money where the mouth is and supply them with resource. So we offered each of the community safety partnership areas a problem-solving post, someone to come in, work across the partnership to deal with local issues. The other idea around this was actually to bring them together on occasions where some of those issues are local, but some issues which clearly go across boundary, we need to be dealing with together, make it more effective and more efficient moving forward. But I also realised it was a bit pointless giving this post some problem-solving capability if there was no funds behind it to sort of inject into local projects. So there was a fairly substantial community fund put behind that as well, which the community safety partnerships could bid into. 3 years on, Chair, I can report that I think we're in a really good place. And if people ask me in the past 3 years, in my last term of office, if there's one or two things that you could say you did well, I mean, there's other bits, you can say what the bits you didn't do so well, but that you're proud of. This is one of them. And I say this is my team and the partners making this happen. Like with any change, there was a bit of resistance at the beginning, and we had to work our way through it. But you have the paper in front of you, panel. What I can say, from things like the development, and I think the panel has seen it, of some county line awareness training and the video, which is now cross-county. So that was done through this across counties. That's the high harm, to some of the examples that you have seen in the paper. And I've had the chairs of the community safety partnerships together recently giving me some examples. And what is fantastic is their enthusiasm. They really appreciate that resource, that close working. They're all coming together, sharing good practice, and they do. Actually, one chair said, yeah, that's brilliant, we're going to do that here. But most importantly, it's really impacted on our local communities. And I look at, we can bandish figures around, but actually antisocial behaviour is significantly down across our county in every area. We've seen neighbourhood crime significantly down. I think this sort of work across the partnership, along with some of the safer streets work that we have done with funding from government, along with the drug strategy work with funding from government, that's why some of those crime types, knife crime, is down. I think, and I truly believe it's because that partnership response, some really dedicated people on the front line delivering with some good leadership and investment by the Police and Crime Commissioner and others. So I think the paper speaks for itself, Chair. I'll stop there.
Thank you. Any questions? Councillor Bradnam.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. I really appreciated this report, because what this demonstrates, it's much easier to do one big thing and fund it, but actually, and it's much harder to find the local need and identify who can deliver and who can work with it. And I know, thinking locally in my own district, I know you're working with the Community Safety Partnership, obviously in South Cambridgeshire, and Councillor Leeming sits on that as well. So all good stuff. So one of the things that I saw and thought that's interesting is that, if you remember in your report on page 27, you talk about the fact that in Finland, the extra money had been spent on dealing with fly tipping. And whereas in South Cambridgeshire, the money had been spent on, or some of the money had been spent on providing training sessions for parents to enable them more easily to identify where children might be vulnerable or might be being influenced. And just in conversation with our officer in Cambridgeshire, in South Cambridgeshire, she said, you know, all of our parents would say, oh, my child wouldn't get involved in any of that. You know, any parent is likely to say that. And she said that actually what this has done is given those parents who might have felt quite safe, you know, quite comfortable about their child, the recognition that their child, when they're away from home, might be being influenced. And it, you know, it might be that the child is a bit of a loner or might appear to be socially fine, you know, but they're all vulnerable in one way or another. It might just be to do with where they go or the activities that they take part in or don't take part in. But so what is the beauty of this is that you've been able to respond to the need that was identified by the people in the district where the Community Safety Partnership is running, and I think that's excellent. The other thing she said was, oh, the reason we don't do anything about fly tipping is because our waste department has a specific responsibility for looking after that. So it also depends on how district councils and local authorities use their money. But no, I thought it was a very encouraging report, and I know it's not easy to put numbers on this, but it would be good to see how much you think benefit has come out of this. But I know that's hard to quantify. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions? Councillor Leaming.
Thank you, Chair. I actually just thought I probably ought to declare an interest in that I do sit on the Community Safety Partnership, so I'll do that formally now. From my experience on the Community Safety Partnership, we found that receiving timely data from the police is really helpful. And I wondered whether you had sort of data sharing information with all the community safety partnerships, because it really does help the community partnership be able to focus and target work in particular areas. I wondered if that was consistent across the county.
Yeah, that certainly from a policing perspective, and I think from a partner agency perspective, I've actually got one of my officers used to work on a community safety partnership, Shona, everyone knows Shona, who is passionate in this role as well. So I thank her because she's, if not partly, mainly responsible. But most importantly, all of the we need to give them another name. They're much more than that. All of those individuals we've got involved, and I visited the one in Cambridge City recently. South Cam's got excellent. They all come together very regularly as well to share good practice. And if I may just come back, Councillor Bradnam, and the whole point was that those local issues, you know, recognised by, but they won't be the only ones. So in Finland, they did a bit of work around fly tipping, and it was really quite you know, a significant thing they did, because it wasn't just fly tipping, you know, it was drug taking there as well. But they are doing other things, and of course they're also doing the county lines thing, which was done by South Cambs and Cambridge City and shared as well. So you know, there's lots and lots of things going on around that. And the best feedback is from themselves, the community safety partnerships and the chairs who are all in a good place. And probably the next thing, what I didn't mention, is that it's been regarded, I'll look to Christina here, but when it comes to, there's actually meant to be an ongoing national review of these partnerships. And I know that we're held in very high regard centrally from the government in some of the work we've done, and it's seen as a best practice. I'm getting nods, so I'm okay with that. Okay.
Thank you. That's very reassuring. Any further questions on this item? Councillor Bradnam and then Councillor Holloway.
Thank you. Just coming back. I just wondered whether you are become aware through your working over the county of types of locations that attract antisocial behaviour, and it might be types of businesses or locations of businesses that are likely to attract either referrals because there are concerns that there might be, for example, county lines happening somewhere, or drug dealing, you know, and again, that might be through local referral, you know, I'm worried about that particular premises, can you have a look kind of thing, to the police, or it might be that location is vulnerable, and it might be the same sort of location in all villages, like, I don't know, the recreation ground or somewhere. I mean, do you find that there are places where you can almost predict antisocial behaviour might be generated from?
Yes, it is a very simple answer to that, and I think both the constabulary and the partnerships, local authority, there's a wealth of data, and of course, when we talk about antisocial behaviour, it's so many different things. Antisocial behaviour in a rural community could be something that could be about driving or then hair coursing or what surrounds hair coursing, because that's a crime, as opposed to our city centres. Just on this, we recently were successful in getting £1 million from a Home Office to tackle antisocial behaviour. That came to me, so to the constabulary, to policing. What I was really pleased with this is that, some areas that's been used on hotspot policing, which is a perfectly good way to manage the money. But policing have also used youth services. So not only have they gone out and dealt with antisocial behaviour, they then referred them on to youth workers. So part of that £1 million we spent on youth workers. And as a result, antisocial behaviour is down 27%. It's not rocket science, is it, to anybody? The police can go and deal with what's in front of them, but, to keep them, and if it is generally young people out of trouble, we've got to do something about that. And that's exactly where my police and crime plan will go. So the answer is yes, there's lots of data there. And that forms up. And that's exactly why we want to enable the community safety partnerships as well, because it's not just the data. I think any of you from your local patches, you will know where the issues are. And 9 times out of 10, you probably know how to solve them as well, if you were able to. So that's the whole point of this, is identifying those local issues, but the data is there to back it up as well.
Reminded me one other thing is there anything that the police are able, or that you are able to encourage the police to do about e-scooters?
I thought I might get away with an e-scooter question today. Once again, we say about enforcement, and this is it fills my mailbag. I was asked about it the other day, and I'm sure you will get lots of questions on this as well. Firstly, let's be clear. If people use these things on public highways without insurance, driving licence, and they're breaking the law. The next bit then is, why aren't the police enforcing the law? Well, the police do enforce the law, but clearly they have to prioritise as well. We saw the trial in Cambridge City. We had the lawful pilot of the use of these, which was meant to feed data into government in relation to new legislation, because actually the legislation that the police use now is not designed for these e-scooters and e-bikes, so it makes it rather tricky and complicated. But we still haven't seen that come to fruition, the new legislation, because where that would also be helpful is that, these are really easy to get hold of. You can go to any of the major retailers or online and buy yourself an e-scooter and then go and ride it up and down the road, which is against the law. But, actually dealing with it at source, it's legal to buy one of these things and drive them around your own private land, but I'm not sure many people do that. So that's another area that needs to be looked at as well, is that, the selling of these things in the first place, because we'd probably want the police to spend their time, making sure we're not burgled and things like that, rather than dealing with e-scooters, if there is another way of dealing with e-scooters. The only final thing I would say in relation to e-scooters is that they can be inherently dangerous. And particularly when young people, road safety will be a priority. Young people have lost their lives on these things because they are motor vehicles, and we need to be really cognizant of that. And the other thing that I'm hearing more and more, and also very cognizant, is people with disabilities, hearing impairment, etc., who can't hear these things coming, pretty much like electric cars, actually. But, we need to be very mindful of that. The police do enforce. Would I want more enforcement? Yes, but the Chief Constable has to balance his resources in relation to the priorities in front of him. But we do need further legislation to support the police and the local authorities in dealing with this problem.
Thank you. Councillor Holloway.
Thank you. Like others, my experience of the Community Safety Partnership in Cambridge has been really, really positive, and it's great that we've got Shona coming along and attending those meetings as well, so we've got a good relationship with the OPCC. So that's been great. Thank you very much. The problem-solving coordinator role has also been extremely helpful, so thank you for that as well. I suppose the only thing we would say is that the sort of short-term nature of the funding can prove a difficulty. I know that you're probably going to say, well, that's what comes from government, and then that restricts you. But I mean, that is probably the only complaint we would have. Otherwise, we've been really pleased with the working relationship we have and with the funding that we've received. But if there is any way to have a bit more certainty over funding going forward, that would be great. Can I ask a second question now, or shall I wait till that one's... Okay, the second one relates to page 29. You mentioned some really good initiatives in relation to tackling violence against women and girls in Cambridge City, which has been excellent, and thank you very much for that. These all relate to work that's more about prevention within the community, which is extremely important. What I wondered, I mean, this is slightly tangential to this topic, but in terms of the police work with victims and survivors, clearly that's been a priority for you, which is excellent. And I just wondered if you could talk a bit about whether you see that there has been a change and what further work you, with obviously the Chief Constable, will be doing to ensure that the experience of victims and survivors improves essentially when they are coming into contact with the police, alongside obviously that prevention work that's going on, which has been very good.
So in relation to the funding, most of these are year-long funding things, and then with the cliff edge. Probably against some better advice from my commissioning team, etc. I'm not sure I'm allowed to. Yeah, I am. I did 3-year funding, which is, if you think about it, I'm in for another 3 years. That's pretty good. That's the best we're going to get. Normally it's 1 year. Most of our commission grants are 1 year. I recognise to keep good people, and we have, I think, Chloe, you got there, to keep good people, we've got to give them a secure future. And they're all really committed to this, so I was very happy. It's a big chunk of my commissioning grant, but I think it's really important, so 3 years. The next bit, the violence against women and girls, yeah, you're right, there's been some excellent work across the county. In Cambridge, I've visited there, and Peterborough and elsewhere. In relation to survivors of violence and sexual violence in relation to women and girls, obviously we have our victims hub and lots of work that they do. We also have those very specialist commission services which are commissioned by me. I'm quite passionate about this, having been a detective, having investigated sexual offences mostly against young girls or women, that there are support services, because when I was doing this there was very little. Now we commission a number. I can certainly bring back, I've visited most of them, so you've got like Cambridge Rape Crisis Centre, etc., Peterborough Women's Aid, a host of them, and we've got that, and I can give you that information or come back. So there's that third and that real specialist support ongoing. Obviously we've got our IDVAs and ISVAs, the domestic violence and sexual violence. Pleadale will continue to lobby. Obviously that's cliff edge funding as well, and that could be really significant. So I will be lobbying very hard into this new government. Everything I've seen so far, I think they talk about appointing a minister for violence against women and girls. So I would like to think this government will be very supportive and continue funding those posts. I'm hoping they will do. And of course, the police themselves and the training that they do as officers in the case and the ongoing support. I get regular updates on this, not least of which it's a strategic policing requirement and it's a local requirement from the Chief Constable and from the specialist teams, both in relation to policing. And of course, through the commissioning bit as well, I get not only we're making decisions around commissioning, but a lot of updates. So I know there's lots of good work. I think we're doing as much as we possibly can, and I will always be open to anything else we can do to support survivors of these most horrific and abhorrent crimes.
Thank you, Commissioner. From a social worker perspective, having to work with some of those resources, I can say that personal experience and professional experience has always been absolutely top-notch at a very, very difficult time. Any further questions? No? Okay, thank you very much. In which case then the recommendation for this item is for the panel to review the action taken by the Police and Crime Commissioner to support the Commissioner in this work. Are members in agreement? Yes. Thank you. Anonymous agreement. Thank you very much. Unanimous, not anonymous. Okay, we're going to move forward to agenda item number 6, the forward planning. Commissioner, at this point in the meeting, you're free to go should you wish to. We are going to ask Chief Exec to stay so that we can have that conversation about forward planning work streams and things. Thank you very much to you and your team, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we move to agenda item number 6, forward planning then. So this is our final item on the agenda for today. Members have had an opportunity to have a look at our forward plan with specific reference at this point to the November and February meetings. Do members have any comments or questions? Councillor Leeming.
Thank you, Chair. I was wondering whether we would be able to add something to this work plan at some point, ideally as soon as possible. The topic would be the probation service. I understand that that Daryl's role would cover a responsibility for supervising some of the probation work, and given that we've got crowded prisons, there's government policy to release prisoners early. Sort of managing ex-offenders in the community would be of high significance. And I wondered, particularly given that the service was inspected in the spring of this year and was deemed inadequate, I wanted to understand how what our plans were in how to manage the situation in prisons and probation. Thank you.
Thank you for the. So I'm looking at the options we have around the Criminal Justice Board. The Commissioner does get briefed in relation to the current early release scheme and other aspects like that. So we've got that oversight on there. It is something we could explore, certainly from the CJB side, which is the Criminal Justice Board side. I'm just mindful of the depth of the papers that you've got coming and the time of that, but I appreciate there is an urgency which you've just identified, particularly on the prison release scheme, and how the Commissioner fulfills his statutory responsibility about oversight of that. So there is something I could potentially put together for the November meeting. I'm just mindful that the November meeting, you've got the draft police and crime plan coming, and that is you have got a statutory responsibility around that to approve that side of things. There is the delivery of the police and crime plan commissioning and grants side of the work. And again, you've just alluded to violence against women and girls, and that's an important paper that has already been requested. The delivery plan update, I'm saying that there isn't a delivery plan update because we're developing the plan, and from that we develop a delivery plan. But we had got a request in for a constabulary budget considerations, which was a paper we've previously bought, which starts to outline some of the issues that you're going to have to discuss in the precept. So it is. I can look at that, and is there anything specifically that you're wanting in relation to that side of it, to give at least a briefing update on where we are?
Oh, hi there, it's working now. I think given the urgency, as I understand, the last thing I read about these early prisoner release schemes, it was actually taking place in September. It was planned to be going on now, so it's quite pertinent. And given that our inspection was inadequate, I am concerned about the combination of the two things, about how we can have confidence that in our area that this has been dealt with properly. Perhaps we could do it in two pieces. We could perhaps do a brief overview in November and then perhaps have a deeper dive later. But I think given that it's a timely issue, I would be reluctant to let it slip until a long way down the agenda.
So I think possibly there was a bit of cross communication there, because I think what you were asking was, did we have any particular things around the constabulary budget pressures rather than probation? I think we were at cross purposes there. However, I think you just said, Jack, that in terms of the November meeting, the delivery plan update is not appropriate at that one, because actually you're presenting the plan as opposed to the update. So I wonder if we, and that would also be the meeting where you would be talking us through the budget pressures, the constabulary budget pressures. And I think we have done that for the last 2 years, and it has been very, very instrumental in providing members with a very thorough understanding of the pressures from all sides before we get into that discussion around precept, etc. Also taking on board the fact that there's some urgency here. I don't know whether this is allowed, but could it be that members had a paper around probation sort of circulated prior to the November meeting that actually then they might just bring questions on? Or could we have a paper circulated around about the November meeting that we could then have a mechanism for coming back with questions before the February meeting or during the February meeting? Is that, I don't know whether that's allowed or possible, is it? Yes. So, oh, you have to turn yours off, Helen. Sorry. We're going to do one at a time.
What I'll do is I'll come back to you. I'll look at that side and come back to you in relation to that. I think we can answer some of the points you've got in the urgent concerns that you've identified, because the Commissioner is briefed regularly on the points that you've raised there. So I think I'll look at how we can present that based upon what you've said, and I'll tie in with.
We could maybe have something that was a bit like a briefing, something shorter with some headlines that actually then we could have a deeper discussion on a bit further on in our meeting kind of schedule. But appreciating the urgency, that would be good to have the headlines of it, wouldn't it?
Thank you. The one thing that I would like to ensure is that whatever is circulated is made public, because I think it is a matter of public interest and public concern about how this early release of prisoners is being managed. Thank you.
Okay, any further comments, questions, suggestions for the work plan? Thank you. Yeah, did you have anything? Yes, of course, Jack. You're all right with mine, yeah.
Yeah, so I'm just looking at the plan going forward. Ultimately, we've got the February plan as well identified, and predominantly that's around the precept. And we've also got the veto date included there, which is 2 weeks after, and these are timelined around that. I'm looking at the March one going forward. Ultimately, I'm proposing to the panel that you've got the plan hopefully agreed in November. Then there is, well, how are you going to deliver it? So I think there's a paper there for the panel around how the Commission is going to deliver what he's just pointed out in his plan. So that would be a proposal around a delivery plan paper in there.
In March?
In March, yes. And I think it's a point that's been identified today, and also at my hearing as such, was around engagement. And I'm proposing that ultimately in March as well, the Commissioner's approach to comms and engagement is quite important around and we've done previously a report on that, and it'd be timely then to consider that as a proposed paper as well in March. That's what I'd propose to the panel.
Okay.
So-
Thank you. Anybody, any comment?
Just to say, I agree with Councillor Leeming that it would be very useful to have something on the probation service. And I don't know whether this would be too simplistic, but I think actually something that sort of outlines how it works and what we as local members and councillors and what the public can expect, because just to understand what the impact of that early release is on individuals in our own divisions who might be affected by that early release would be quite useful to understand for us. And for example, if there are support mechanisms that would be helpful for us to be aware of around that, that would be very useful, I think.
Yeah, I think the challenge here is around the role of the Commissioner in this, because the Commissioner is not responsible for the probation service, but has scrutiny and oversight. And so asking the Commissioner about what the probation service are doing, that is not something that would be within the Commissioner's remit. But we could look at, I've heard the concerns you've had in relation to the prison release scheme. I appreciate that. And as I say, the Commissioner does, the Commission does have in, his receipt of updates in regards to that. So it's about the scrutiny that it puts into that and holding the Chief Constable to account around the efficiency and effectiveness of that. So there is something we could explore around that. But as for the probation service and what they do, and that is not something I would consider is in the Commissioner's domain. Ultimately, we do have the Criminal Justice Board, of which the probation service sit on. But again, it's the mechanics of the Criminal Justice Board and what is received in there. So I will, if I go back and then I will liaise with Pippa and Neil in relation to what we can put together around that to try and meet some of the points you've raised, if that's in order.
Thank you. It's maybe about helping us understand the Commissioner's role in relation to the Criminal Justice Board and the services that fall under that particular umbrella, and his role in holding them to account. Yeah? Okay, thank you very much. Anybody got any other further questions, comments, views, ideas? No? In which case, thank you very much for this afternoon, and we will see you all again on the 27th of November, and we'll be back in Peterborough for that meeting. Thank you very much.